The warning beacon lit up red across every screen in Station Olympus. Commander Tail stood in the command center, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the data stream in. 47 warships, all bearing the mark of the Kryn Dominion, all heading directly into human space. Lieutenant Hana worked quickly at her console, her fingers dancing across the controls. She pulled up the trajectory data and projected it onto the main display. The enemy fleet was moving at steady speed, making no attempt to hide their approach. They were 3 hours from crossing the official boundary. "They know we can see them," Hana said quietly. "This is deliberate," Tail nodded. He had expected something like this. For the past year, there had been whispers across the Galactic Coalition, species testing boundaries, pushing limits, seeing how far they could go before someone pushed back. The Kryn had been particularly bold in their rhetoric, claiming that human space included resources that rightfully belonged to all Coalition members. "Send the standard warning," Tail ordered. Hana transmitted the message on all frequencies. It was simple and direct. Human space began at the marked boundary. Any vessels crossing without authorization would be dealt with immediately. The message included coordinates for the nearest diplomatic station where proper clearance could be obtained. The Kryn fleet received the transmission. Their response came back within minutes. It was a formal note stating their intention to conduct scientific surveys in the region. They cited a coalition provision that allowed member species to study unclaimed territories. The problem was the territory they wanted to study had been claimed by humanity for 200 years. Ambassador Jiwan arrived at the command center 30 minutes later. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for reading between the lines of every diplomatic message. She reviewed the Kryn response and shook her head. "They think we will negotiate," she said. "They have studied our history. 300 years of diplomacy. 300 years of warnings, discussions, sanctions, treaties. They believe they know the pattern." Tail turned to face her. "What does Earth Command say?" G1 pulled up a secure message on her personal device. She read it twice before speaking. "One warning. No second chances." Those are the exact words. The command center went quiet. Every officer present understood what that meant. The rules had changed. Humanity had spent 3 centuries being the reasonable voice in the coalition. They had negotiated when others would have fought. They had compromised when others would have invaded. They had shown patience that other species mistook for weakness, but that patience had limits. Hana checked her display again. "They crossed the boundary 4 minutes ago. They are now officially in human space." Tail walked to the communication console himself. He opened a direct channel to the Kryn flagship. The face of War Prime Vexthor appeared on the screen. He was a massive creature, covered in thick armor plating that seemed to be part of his natural biology. His eyes were small and dark, set deep in his skull. "War Prime Vexthor," Tail said calmly. "You have entered human space without authorization. You have 6 hours to withdraw your fleet beyond the boundary. There will be no further communication on this matter." Vexthor made a sound that might have been laughter. "Commander, surely we can discuss this reasonably. The Coalition provides for scientific exploration. We mean no harm to your colonies. We simply wish to study the stellar phenomena in this region." 6 hours, Tail repeated. "The timer begins now." He closed the channel before Vexthor could respond. G1 watched the countdown begin on the main display. 6 hours, 360 minutes, 21,600 seconds. Each one ticking away toward an outcome that could be avoided if the Kryn simply listened. "They won't leave," Hana said softly. "They think this is the beginning of negotiations." "I know," Tail replied. High strategist Kilmara stood beside War Prime Vexthor on the Kryn flagship. She had studied human behavior for decades. She had analyzed every conflict, every diplomatic exchange, every treaty negotiation in human history. The pattern was clear. Humans warned. Then they talked. Then they warned again. Then they talked more. Eventually, some compromise was reached. It always worked that way. "They will send ambassadors," Kilmara assured Vexthor. "Within 2 hours, we will receive requests for dialogue. They will ask what we truly want. We will negotiate access rights, perhaps some trade agreements. This is how humans operate." Vexthor settled into his command chair. "Continue with the surveys. Begin scanning the 3rd planet. I want detailed mineral reports." The Kryn fleet spread out across human space like they owned it. Their survey ships deployed probes. Their escort vessels took up defensive positions. They acted as if the human warning had been nothing more than a formality. Back on Station Olympus, Tail received regular updates. The Kryn were scanning a mining colony on the third planet. The colony had 8,000 human workers and their families. The presence of enemy warships in orbit was causing panic among the civilian population. "Evacuate the colony," Tail ordered. "Standard emergency protocols. I want everyone off that planet within 4 hours." Hana coordinated with the colony administrators. Transport ships began arriving to collect the miners and their families. The evacuation proceeded smoothly. Everyone understood what the order meant. When civilians were moved out of an area, it meant that area was about to become a battlefield. 5 hours passed, then 5.5. The Kryn showed no signs of leaving. Their ships remained in orbit around the mining colony. Their probes continued gathering data. Their communications were full of confident chatter about what they would demand in the coming negotiations. Ambassador Jiwan stood beside Tai Il as the final minutes counted down. She had sent 36 messages to Coalition headquarters explaining the situation. The responses ranged from concerned to horrified. Every species expected humanity to extend the deadline, to send negotiators, to follow the pattern of the past 3 centuries. 59 minutes, Hana announced. Tae-il opened a secure channel to Admiral Su-jin. The Admiral's fleet had been waiting in nearby space, hidden behind a small moon for the past 3 hours. 200 warships, the largest human battle group assembled in 50 years. "Admiral," Tae-il said simply, "execute." "Understood," Su-jin replied. On the Kryn flagship, Kilmara was beginning to feel the first hints of doubt. 6 hours had almost passed. No human ambassadors had arrived. No negotiators. No diplomats seeking dialogue. Just silence. "War Prime," she said carefully. "Perhaps we should—" The sensor alarm screamed. Every screen on the Kryn flagship lit up red. 200 human warships had just appeared out of faster-than-light travel. They surrounded the Kryn fleet in a perfect sphere. Escape routes were blocked. Every Kryn vessel was targeted by multiple human ships. Vexthor stood from his chair, his confidence evaporating. "Open communications. Tell them we are willing to negotiate." But the human ships did not respond to hails. They did not send messages. They did not offer terms. The 6 hours were over. The humans had said what they meant. They did not repeat themselves. Admiral Su-jin watched the tactical display from the bridge of her flagship. Every Kryn vessel was marked in red. Every human ship was marked in blue. The blue surrounded the red completely. There was no gap, no escape route, no possibility of retreat. She activated her fleet-wide channel. Her voice was calm and steady. "All ships. Weapons free. Eliminate all hostile vessels. Rules of engagement are active. Any ship that powers down and stops moving is to be disabled, not destroyed." Captain Jae-hwan sat in the pilot seat of the experimental warship named Reckoning. The ship was smaller than most warships, but faster and more maneuverable. It was built for one purpose: precision strikes that disabled enemy ships without destroying them entirely, unless destruction was necessary. Target lock confirmed on Kryn Vessel 7, his weapons officer reported. "Fire," Jae-hwan said. The Reckoning fired a concentrated beam that struck the Kryn warship's engine section. The beam was designed by Dr. Yuna, who had spent 5 years perfecting a weapon that could cut through shields and armor like a hot knife through butter. The Kryn ship's engines exploded. The vessel went dark and began drifting. Across the battlefield, similar strikes happened simultaneously. Human ships moved with coordination that seemed impossible. Every captain knew exactly where to be and exactly when to fire. They had trained for this scenario dozens of times. The difference was that now the targets were real. War Prime Vexthor grabbed his communications officer by the arm. "Send a message to the human fleet. Tell them we surrender. Tell them we will withdraw immediately." The communications officer tried every frequency, every channel, every emergency band. The human ships received the messages. The tactical computers logged them. But no human responded. There was no acknowledgement, no reply. Just the continued systematic destruction of the Kryn fleet. "Why won't they answer?" Vexthor shouted. High Strategist Kilmara understood suddenly. The humans had said there would be no further communication. They had meant it literally. The time for talking was over. The humans were simply following through on exactly what they had promised. A Kryn destroyer tried to run. It broke formation and accelerated toward the edge of the human formation. 3 human ships moved to intercept. They fired in sequence. The first shot disabled the destroyer's shields. The second shot disabled its weapons. The third shot disabled its engines. The entire engagement took 14 seconds. Sub-Commander Ricktal served on one of the Kryn escort vessels. He had argued against this mission from the beginning. He had studied human history more carefully than Kilmara. He had noticed something she had missed. Humans negotiated about almost everything. They compromised on trade. They discussed territory. They debated resources. But when they set a boundary and gave a warning, they never negotiated about that. Not once in 300 years. Power down all systems, Ricktal ordered his crew. Shut down engines. Shut down weapons. Broadcast our surrender on all frequencies. His crew hesitated. Kryn warriors did not surrender easily, but they could see what was happening around them. Ship after ship being torn apart or disabled. The human attack was efficient, professional, overwhelming. Ricktal's ship went dark. It stopped moving. Human ships surrounded it but did not fire. They simply kept it contained while they dealt with vessels that were still fighting. 4 minutes into the battle, 31 Kryn ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 16 finally understood what was happening. Some tried to surrender like Ricktal had. Others tried to fight. A few tried to run. Captain Bora commanded a human strike group that specialized in fast attacks. Her 3 ships worked together like parts of a single organism. They targeted a Kryn heavy cruiser that was still firing at human vessels. Her ships came at it from 3 different angles simultaneously. Target their command section, Bora ordered. Make it quick. The 3 ships fired together. Their combined beam punched through the cruiser's shields and tore the command section apart. The cruiser broke into pieces. Emergency pods ejected from various sections. Human recovery ships were already moving to collect the survivors. Vexthor watched his fleet die. He had brought 47 ships into human space. Now he had fewer than 10 still operational, and those were surrounded by human vessels that could destroy them at any moment. All ships cease fire, he broadcast on the Kryn fleet channel. Power down immediately. Surrender to the human forces. The remaining Kryn ships went dark one by one. They stopped shooting. They stopped moving. They drifted in space like dead fish in a pond. Admiral Sujin watched the battle end. 18 minutes from start to finish. Her fleet had disabled or destroyed every hostile vessel. The human casualty report came in. 0 deaths, 3 minor injuries from equipment malfunctions, 2 ships with light damage that could be repaired within hours. She opened a channel to Station Olympus. Commander Tail appeared on her screen. Sector clear, Sujin reported. No human casualties. 47 enemy vessels neutralized. We have approximately 3,000 enemy survivors in escape pods. Requesting recovery protocols. Recover all survivors, Tail replied. Provide medical assistance. Treat them according to coalition standards for prisoners of war. Understood. Sujin switched to her fleet channel. All ships begin recovery operations. Collect every escape pod. Every survivor. Provide medical assistance as needed. These people are now under human protection. Captain Jaehwan guided the reckoning through the debris field. His crew located escape pods and brought them aboard. The Kryn warriors inside were terrified. They had been taught that humans were soft, weak, unwilling to fight. Now they had just witnessed the most efficient military action any of them had ever seen. Dr. Yuna monitored the weapons performance data from her station. Her beam weapons had performed exactly as designed. 98% hit rate. 0 friendly fire incidents. Minimal collateral damage. The weapons had allowed human forces to be precise and devastating at the same time. On the Kryn flagship, medical teams from a human cruiser came aboard to help with the wounded. Vexthor watched in confusion as human medics worked alongside Kryn crew members to save injured warriors. The humans showed no hatred, no anger. They simply did their job with professional efficiency. I don't understand, Vexthor said to the human medical officer in charge. The officer looked up from the soldier she was treating. You were warned. You didn't listen. Now you are prisoners. We fight when we must. We help when we can. This is not complicated. Sub-Commander Ricktal was brought aboard a human ship with his crew. They were placed in a holding area that was clean and temperature-controlled. Food was provided. Medical screening was conducted. No one was mistreated. A human officer came to speak with them. He was young, perhaps in his 30s. He carried a datapad and seemed completely calm. "I am Lieutenant Hyunwoo," he said. "You are prisoners of war. You will be held according to coalition standards. Your government will be notified." "Is anyone injured?" Riktal stepped forward. "Why did you not respond to our surrender messages?" Hyunwoo looked at him with genuine confusion. "You were told there would be no further communication. Did you think that was a suggestion?" Back on Station Olympus, Ambassador Ji-won was already dealing with incoming messages from Coalition headquarters. Every species wanted to know what had happened, why the humans had acted so quickly, why there had been no negotiation period. She prepared a simple statement. It would be broadcast to the entire Coalition within the hour. The statement said exactly what had happened. The Kryn had been warned. They had been given a deadline. They had chosen to ignore it. The humans had done exactly what they said they would do. Commander Tai-il stood in the command center and watched the cleanup operations. Human ships were collecting debris, recovering survivors, securing the area. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Hana approached him with a report. "Casualty assessment is complete. We lost no ships, no personnel. The Kryn fleet has been completely neutralized." Tai-il nodded. "Send a message to the mining colony. They can return home. The threat has been eliminated." The message went out. Within hours, the transport ships would return the miners and their families to their homes. Life would go back to normal. The only difference was that now everyone knew. When humans gave a warning, they meant every word. News traveled fast across the Galactic Coalition. Within 6 hours of the battle, every major government knew what had happened. The Kryn Dominion had crossed into human space. The humans had given one warning. The Kryn had ignored it. The Kryn fleet had been destroyed in 18 minutes. Counselor Dong Min arrived at Coalition headquarters on the central station called Unity Prime. The station was massive, home to representatives from 43 different species. It orbited a neutral star system that belonged to no one. It was where the galaxy came together to talk. Dong Min was met by a crowd of representatives demanding answers. They gathered in the main council chamber, their voices overlapping as they shouted questions. Why had the humans acted so quickly? Why had there been no diplomatic process? Why had they not sought council approval before using military force? Dongmin waited for the noise to die down. When the chamber was finally quiet, he spoke. His voice was calm and carried easily through the room. The Kryn Dominion was given a clear warning, he said. They were told to leave human space within 6 hours. They were told there would be no further communication. They chose to stay. We kept our word. A representative from the Tavarian Accord stood up. But there are procedures, protocols. The Coalition has rules about military action. You should have brought this to the Council. Our space, our rules, Dongmin replied simply. Every species here has the right to defend their territory. The Kryn were not on the border. They were not lost. They deliberately invaded our space. We defended it. Intelligence Officer Mireille sat in a secure room deep within the human embassy on Unity Prime. She reviewed classified reports that had been gathered over the past year. The information was disturbing but not surprising. 3 other major powers had been watching the Kryn incursion carefully. The Valorian Empire had been planning a similar test of human borders in the eastern sectors. The Halcyon Collective had been considering whether to claim mineral rights in human territory without permission. The Jarn Republic had been discussing how to pressure humans into sharing technology through territorial disputes. All 3 had been operating on the same assumption. Humans would negotiate. Humans always negotiated. Push them a little and they would give ground. Push them more and they would compromise. It was the pattern of 300 years. The battle had changed everything. Within hours of the news spreading, all 3 governments had canceled their plans. Emergency diplomatic messages had been sent to human ambassadors apologizing for any misunderstandings. Trade agreements that had been stalled for months were suddenly approved. Territory disputes that had dragged on for years were quietly dropped. Mireille compiled her findings into a report. The title was simple, The Cost of Testing Boundaries. She sent it directly to Earth Command. Diplomat caste Jenkara of the Valorian Empire was considered one of the finest political minds in the galaxy. She had negotiated treaties between species that had been at war for centuries. She had prevented conflicts that could have destroyed entire worlds. Now she was studying the human response to the Kryn, trying to understand what had happened. She watched recordings of human diplomatic interactions over the past 3 centuries. She analyzed negotiation patterns. She studied human psychology. And slowly she began to see what others had missed. Humans were extraordinarily patient. They would discuss anything, debate anything, negotiate anything. Trade agreements could take years. Cultural exchange programs could take decades. Scientific cooperation could take generations. Humans were willing to talk as long as necessary. But territorial boundaries were different. When humans set a border, that border was final. They had never moved a boundary because of pressure, never compromised on territorial integrity, never negotiated away their space. And they had always been clear about this. The information was in every treaty they had ever signed. Everyone else had simply assumed that given enough pressure, humans would bend like they did on other issues. It was a fatal miscalculation. Genkara wrote her own analysis. She presented it to the Valorian Emperor personally. Humans divide their priorities into categories, she explained. Some things are negotiable. Some things are not. Territory is not. They have been telling us this for 300 years. We were not listening. Fleet Marshal Cross of the Tavarian Accord commanded one of the largest military forces in the coalition. He had 3,000 warships under his command. He had fought in 6 major conflicts. He considered himself an expert in military strategy. He watched the tactical recordings of the human attack on the Kryn fleet. He watched them 3 times. Each time he saw something new. The coordination was perfect. The timing was precise. The efficiency was terrifying. But what struck him most was the restraint. The humans could have destroyed every Kryn ship in the first 30 seconds. They had the firepower. They had the position. They had every advantage. Instead, they disabled ships when possible. They recovered survivors immediately. They provided medical care to the wounded. It was not the action of a species that enjoyed violence. It was the action of a species that understood violence and used it only when necessary. And when they did use it, they used exactly enough to achieve their objective and no more. Cross sent a message to his government. Do not test the humans. They are more dangerous than we understood, not because they are aggressive, but because they are precise. The Galactic Coalition called an emergency session. Representatives from every member species attended. The session was scheduled to discuss the human military action and whether it violated coalition principles. Ambassador Ji-Wan attended along with Counselor Dong-min. They sat quietly while other species debated. Some argued that humans had overreacted. Others argued that the Kryn had provoked the response. Still others argued about procedural issues and whether the proper forms had been filed. Finally, Ji-Wan stood to speak. The chamber went silent. She was known for choosing her words carefully. We have been part of this coalition for 300 years, she said. In that time, we have never started a war, never invaded another species' territory, never broken a treaty, never lied in negotiation. Our reputation is built on being reliable, predictable, trustworthy. She paused and looked around the chamber. The Kryn knew our boundary. It is marked. It is registered with the coalition. It has not changed in 200 years. They crossed it anyway. We gave them a warning and a deadline. We told them exactly what would happen if they did not leave. They chose to ignore us. We did exactly what we said we would do. Nothing more. Nothing less. But you could have given them more time, a representative argued. You could have— No, Ji-Wan interrupted. We could not. Because if we had, then our word would mean nothing. If we give a deadline and then extend it, why would anyone believe the next deadline? If we make a threat and do not follow through, why would anyone take our warning seriously? She sat down. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. An elder representative from a species called the Morphians stood up. The Morphians were one of the oldest species in the coalition. They had been part of the galactic community for over 1,000 years. The humans are correct, the elder said. We have become lazy in our diplomacy. We say things we do not mean. We make threats we do not keep. We set boundaries and then move them. The humans have reminded us that words have meaning, that warnings should be taken seriously. That clarity is more important than flexibility. Over the following weeks, something changed in the coalition. Species began to communicate more carefully. Diplomats started saying what they actually meant instead of using vague language that could be interpreted multiple ways. Territorial boundaries were respected more strictly. The phrase "humans don't repeat themselves" became common. It was said with respect, not fear. It meant that when a human representative spoke, every word mattered. There was no hidden meaning, no secret agenda, just clear, honest communication. 3 months after the incident, Counselor Dongmin was approached by representatives from 7 different species. Each one thanked him. They explained that the human action had actually made the galaxy safer. Boundaries were clearer. Disputes were settled faster. No one wasted time testing limits that were clearly defined. "You have shown us a better way to communicate," one representative said. "Say what you mean what you say, follow through on your promises." It seemed so simple, but we had forgotten. Mireille updated her intelligence assessments. The probability of territorial conflicts involving human space had dropped to nearly 0. Not because other species feared human military power, but because they trusted human communication. If humans said something was their territory, it was. If they said they would defend it, they would. There was no ambiguity, no uncertainty, no need to test. Ambassador Ji-Wan returned to Earth for meetings with the government. She reported that human standing in the coalition had never been higher. Not through threats or intimidation, but through simple reliability. The galaxy had learned a lesson, and humanity had taught it without saying a word more than necessary. 6 months after the incident with the Kryn fleet, the Galactic Coalition organized a special summit. The topic was understanding human conflict behavior. Species across the galaxy wanted to know how humans thought about war, peace, and everything in between. The coalition invited Professor Sang-Ho to explain. Sang-Ho was a xenopsychology expert who had spent 40 years studying how different species thought and communicated. He had written 12 books on the subject. Now he stood in front of the largest audience he had ever addressed. Representatives from 43 species filled the auditorium. Thousands more watched through live feeds across the galaxy. He began with a simple question. "How many warnings should you give before taking action?" The audience was silent. Different species had different answers. Some believed in multiple warnings. Others believed in endless negotiation. A few believed in immediate action without warning at all. "Humans evolved on a planet called Earth," Sang-Ho continued. "Earth is what we call a death world. Almost everything on that planet can kill you. The weather can kill you. The animals can kill you. Even the plants can kill you. Our ancestors had to develop a way of communicating that was clear and immediate. Confusion meant death." He showed images of Earth, storms that could level cities, animals with teeth and claws designed for killing, plants with toxins that could stop a heart in seconds. Early humans learned to give warnings that were clear and final, Sang-Ho explained. If a tribe marked a territory boundary, crossing it meant war. There was no second warning, no negotiation period, just immediate response, because hesitation meant your tribe might be wiped out. He walked across the stage, his hands moving as he spoke. As humans developed more complex societies, this principle remained. We learned to be patient about many things. We learned to negotiate and compromise. But when we set a hard boundary, that boundary is absolute. It is not the beginning of negotiation. It is the end of discussion. Captain Bora was invited to demonstrate human military training. She stood on a separate stage with several of her officers. They had set up a simulation system that showed how human forces trained for conflict scenarios. "Every warning we give is treated as the only warning we will give," Bora explained. "When we tell someone to stop, we are already prepared to use force if they do not stop. The warning is not a bluff. It is a courtesy, a chance to avoid violence." She ran through a training scenario. A hostile ship approached a human station. A warning was issued. The hostile ship continued. Human forces responded immediately with overwhelming force. "Notice there is no delay," Bora pointed out. "No discussion about whether they really meant to ignore us. No debate about giving them more chances. The warning was clear. They chose to ignore it. We respond according to our training." A representative from a species called the Pelosians raised a question. But what if they did not understand the warning? What if there was a communication error? Bora smiled. "Our warnings are transmitted in 43 languages simultaneously. They include visual markers and mathematical proofs. They are designed to be impossible to misunderstand. If someone claims they did not understand, they are lying. Observer Tilvex was a member of a neutral species that specialized in documenting galactic events. His people did not take sides in conflicts. They simply recorded what happened and tried to understand it. He had been studying human behavior for 2 years. He published a report that became widely read across the coalition. The report was called Human Boundary Psychology, a Study in Clarity. In it, he detailed hundreds of human interactions with other species. The pattern was consistent. Humans negotiated almost everything. Trade terms could go back and forth for months. Cultural agreements could take years. Scientific partnerships could take decades. Humans were patient, flexible, and willing to compromise on most issues. But territorial boundaries were different. When humans set a border, they never moved it under pressure. When they gave a territorial warning, they never gave a second one. When they said they would defend their space, they always did. The key insight, Tilvex wrote, is that humans do not view all issues as equally negotiable. They have a mental category for things that are flexible and things that are not. Borders fall into the second category. Once this is understood, human behavior becomes completely predictable. Elder Matriarch Xian was 800 years old. She was from one of the oldest species in the galaxy. She had been alive when humans first joined the Galactic Coalition. She remembered the early days when humans were new and uncertain about their place among the stars. She was invited to speak at the summit. She moved slowly to the stage, her age showing in every step. But when she spoke, her voice was strong and clear. "I remember when humans first arrived," she said. "We thought they were naive. They were so honest, so direct. They said exactly what they meant. We thought this was because they were young and did not understand diplomacy." She paused and looked across the audience. "We were wrong. They understood perfectly. They simply chose clarity over cleverness. While we were busy reading between the lines, trying to find hidden meanings, they were just telling us the truth." She described an incident from 200 years ago. A species called the Mindari had tried to claim a human colony world. They had presented legal arguments, historical claims, economic necessity. They had expected months of negotiation. The human ambassador at the time was a woman named Ji Yun, Xin recalled. She listened to all the arguments. Then she said 3 words. "No, that's ours." The Mindari tried to continue the discussion. She simply repeated, "No, that's ours." They finally gave up and left. We thought she was being rude. We did not understand she was being clear. The audience listened in silence. Then continued, "Humans have never lied to us. Not once in 300 years. Every promise kept. Every threat followed through. Every boundary enforced. We mistook this consistency for predictability that could be exploited. We thought if we pushed they would bend. We were wrong." Professor Sangho returned to the stage for the final part of his presentation. He wanted to explain why human communication style had developed the way it had. "Humans have a concept called credibility," he said. "It means that your words have value because you follow through on them. If you make a promise and keep it, people trust your next promise. If you make a threat and follow through, people take your next threat seriously." He showed data comparing different species' communication patterns. Most species used warnings as the beginning of negotiation. They would issue multiple warnings, each one slightly more serious, testing to see how far they could push before facing real consequences. "This creates a problem," Sangho explained. "If the first warning is not serious, why should anyone believe it? If you give 10 warnings before acting, then the first 9 warnings are meaningless. People learn to ignore you until warning number 9. He pulled up historical examples of conflicts between non-human species. Many had escalated slowly over years or decades. Multiple warnings were given. Multiple deadlines passed. Eventually, violence occurred, but only after long periods of increasing tension. Humans decided on a different approach, Sangho said. 1 clear warning. 1 deadline. Immediate action if the warning is ignored. This means every warning is taken seriously. Every deadline is respected. Conflicts are resolved quickly, with less overall violence. A representative from the Halcyon Collective asked a question. "But doesn't this make humans seem aggressive? Always ready to fight?" Sangho shook his head. "Humans avoid conflict whenever possible. But when conflict is unavoidable, they end it quickly. Think about the Kryn incident. 18 minutes. Then it was over. Compare that to the Mindari-Pelosian border conflict that lasted 18 years. Which approach caused more total suffering?" The representative sat down without answering. Captain Bora added her perspective. We train for war so we can maintain peace. Every human officer knows that our reputation for following through on warnings is our best defense. If everyone knows we mean what we say, fewer people test us. Less testing means less violence. The summit lasted 3 days. By the end, something had fundamentally shifted in how other species viewed humanity. They were not aggressive warmongers. They were not naive peacekeepers. They were pragmatists who understood that clear communication prevented conflict. Observer Tilvex updated his report with findings from the summit. His conclusion was simple. Humanity has taught the galaxy that clarity is kindness. When you say exactly what you mean and follow through consistently, everyone knows where they stand. This reduces confusion, prevents conflict, and builds trust. It is a lesson the rest of us are still learning. Several species began to reform their own diplomatic protocols. They started issuing clearer warnings. They stopped using vague language in territorial disputes. They followed through on their stated positions more consistently. The result was measurable. Border conflicts across the coalition dropped by 40% over the following year. Trade disputes were resolved faster. Diplomatic negotiations became more efficient. All because humanity had shown that saying what you mean and meaning what you say was not naive. It was simply the most effective way to communicate. 2 years after the Kryn incident, Captain Hyunwoo patrolled the outer boundaries of human space. His ship was a small patrol vessel, designed for long-range monitoring and rapid response. He spent his days checking sensor readings and reviewing reports from the automated warning beacons. The patrols were quiet now. Almost boring. There had not been a single unauthorized crossing of human space in 23 months. The borders were clearly marked. Every species knew where they ended and human space began. More importantly, every species believed that crossing those borders without permission would result in immediate consequences. Hyunwoo reviewed the beacon logs. Thousands of ships pass near human space every day. Trading vessels, scientific expeditions, tourist cruises, military patrols from other species. All of them carefully avoided crossing the marked boundaries. When ships needed to pass through human space, they filed proper requests and waited for approval. The approval usually came within hours. It is strange, his first officer said. 2 years ago, we had incidents every week. Now we have none. Hyunwoo nodded. People believe us now. That makes all the difference. Engineer Da-eun worked at a construction station near the border. She was part of a team designing new warning beacons. The old beacons were functional but basic. They transmitted warnings in multiple languages and displayed visual markers. They worked, but Da-eun thought they could be better. The new beacons she designed were impossible to miss. They were large, bright, and transmitted on every possible frequency. The warning message was simple and clear. Beyond this point lies human space. Authorization required to proceed. Unauthorized entry will result in immediate military response. For access clearance, contact the nearest human diplomatic station. The message was translated into 40 languages. It included mathematical proofs, visual diagrams, and audio signals. It was designed to be understood by any species with space travel capability. The goal is zero ambiguity, Da-eun explained to her team. No one should ever be able to claim they did not know. No one should ever be confused about what will happen if they cross without permission. The new beacons were installed across the entire human border over 6 months. They were tested extensively. They worked perfectly, and they were never triggered by unauthorized crossings because everyone who saw them took them seriously. Merchant Lord Kexval ran one of the largest trading operations in the galaxy. His ships carried goods between dozens of different species. He had been in business for 40 years. He had dealt with the complications of galactic commerce for his entire career. Recently, he had noticed something interesting. Trading with humans had become easier, much easier. Negotiations that used to take months now took weeks. Contracts that used to be full of complex legal language were now straightforward and clear. He met with Ambassador Jiwon to discuss a new trade agreement. They sat in her office on Unity Prime, reviewing the proposed terms. This is remarkably simple, Kexval said, looking at the contract. Only 15 pages. My lawyers expected at least 100. Jiwon smiled. Why use 100 pages when 15 will do? The terms are clear. The prices are fair. The delivery schedules are reasonable. What else do we need to say? Most species add pages of clauses about what happens if this or if that, Kexval replied. contingencies, exceptions, special circumstances. If something unusual happens, we will discuss it and find a solution, G1 said. We do not need to plan for every possible scenario in advance. We trust that both sides will act reasonably. Kexval signed the agreement. Over the following year, his company's trade with human worlds increased by 300%. When his fellow merchants asked why, he told them, humans say what they mean. When they promise delivery by a certain date, they deliver by that date. When they agree to a price, they honor that price. There are no surprises, no hidden complications. It makes business easy. Young warrior Zeklin of the Kryn Dominion was one of the survivors from the destroyed fleet. He had been rescued by human forces and held as a prisoner of war for 6 months. During that time, he had been treated well, given medical care, provided adequate food and shelter. Then he had been released as part of a prisoner exchange. He returned to the Kryn homeworld confused and changed. He had expected humans to be cruel victors. They had destroyed his fleet in minutes. They had overwhelming power, but they had not used that power to be cruel. They had been efficient, professional, and fair. Now 2 years later, Zeklin traveled across the galaxy as a speaker. He visited universities and military academies. He told his story to anyone who would listen. We were warned, he would say, clearly, directly, with a specific deadline. We chose to ignore the warning. We thought humans were like other species. We thought the warning was the beginning of negotiation. We were wrong. He showed recordings of the battle, the precision of the human attack, the coordination, the restraint. They could have killed us all in 30 seconds. Instead, they disabled our ships when possible. They recovered our survivors immediately. They gave medical care to the wounded. Even as they destroyed our fleet, they were already planning to save as many of us as possible. His audiences listened with attention. Many of them had the same misconceptions about humans that the Kryn had held. They thought human patience meant weakness. They thought human willingness to negotiate meant they could be pushed. I have learned something important. Zeklin would conclude his presentations. There is a difference between being peaceful and being harmless. Humans are peaceful. They prefer negotiation to violence. But they are not harmless. When they say they will do something, they will do it. Every time, without exception. This makes them the most dangerous species to provoke and the safest species to befriend. Ambassador G1 had been serving in the Coalition for 20 years. She had seen humanity's reputation change over that time, from newcomers who were seen as naive, to established members who were respected and trusted. She sat in her office reviewing reports from across human space. Trade was booming. Scientific cooperation was at an all-time high. Cultural exchanges were happening with dozens of species. And most importantly, there had not been a single military incident in 2 years. Commander Tai-Il, now promoted to Admiral, visited her office. They had worked together during the Kryn incident. Now they met regularly to coordinate diplomatic and military policy. The border has never been quieter, Tai-Il reported. We maintain readiness, but we have had no cause to use it. That was always the goal, G1 replied. Be ready for war so you can maintain peace. They discussed the upcoming Coalition Council meeting. There was a proposal to use human-style border warnings as the standard across the entire Coalition. Clear markers.
Simple messages.
Immediate consequences for violations. Several species had already adopted similar systems and reported positive results. If the proposal passes, we will have fundamentally changed how the galaxy thinks about boundaries, G1 said. Not through force, but through example. A new species called the Viridians made first contact with the Galactic Coalition. They were nervous. They had been watching galactic civilization from a distance for decades, studying how it worked before deciding to join. They had seen the Kryn incident. They had heard stories about human responses to boundary violations. Their first official meeting was with Admiral Tai-Il at a border station. A delegation of 5 Viridian officials arrived, clearly anxious about the encounter. Tai-Il greeted them warmly. Welcome. We are happy to meet you. Please sit. Would you like something to drink? The Viridian leader, a female named Sherrick, sat carefully. We have heard stories about humanity, about how you defend your borders. We want to be sure we understand the rules correctly. Tai-Il smiled. The rules are simple. Our borders are marked clearly. If you need to pass through human space, File a request at any of our diplomatic stations. Approval usually comes within a few hours. If you are invited to visit human worlds, enjoy your stay. If you have questions, ask. We are happy to help. And if we accidentally cross a border, Sharix asked carefully. Contact us immediately and explain what happened, Tae-il replied. Accidents happen. We understand that. What we do not accept is deliberate violation of our space. As long as you communicate honestly, there will be no problems. Sharix relaxed visibly. We were worried that humans were difficult to deal with. We are very easy to deal with, Tae-il assured her. We say what we mean. We mean what we say. We follow through on our commitments. As long as you do the same, we will be excellent neighbors. The Viridians left the meeting relieved. Over the following months, they established formal diplomatic relations with humanity. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchange programs were started. Scientific cooperation was established. Everything went smoothly because both sides communicated clearly and honestly. Commander Hana, who had been promoted several times since the Kryn incident, worked at Coalition headquarters now. She was part of a team that studied conflict prevention. Her specialty was analyzing how clear communication could prevent misunderstandings that led to violence.